Oh, this is beautiful. This is absolutely poetic. You need to hear this right now because something happened that you don't even know about yet. Something shifted in the shadows. Something changed in the war room where your enemies gather to plot your destruction. They had a plan, a perfect plan, a foolproof strategy that took months to execute. They studied you. They watched you. They identified every crack in your armor, every gap in your defenses, every person you trusted, and then they made their move. They planted someone in your life, someone designed to get close, someone trained to extract information, someone whose entire purpose was to be your downfall disguised as your friend. But here's where the story takes a turn. They never saw coming. Here's where their carefully constructed operation collapsed into absolute chaos. That spy, that informant, that person who was supposed to be feeding them everything they needed to destroy you, they switched sides. Not partially, not secretly playing both teams, completely, fully, irreversibly. They looked at the people who sent them, the ones signing the checks, the ones pulling the strings, and they said, no, not this one. I won't do this to them. And now they're not just refusing to betray you. They're actively protecting you, warning you, defending you against the very people who deployed them. Do you understand what just happened? Do you comprehend the magnitude of what your existence just accomplished? You turned an enemy operative into a guardian angel without even trying. You converted a weapon aimed at your heart into a shield protecting it. You did something that billion-dollar intelligence agencies can't do. You flipped an asset through nothing but being authentically, undeniably, impossibly you. Let me tell you how this started. Let me paint you the picture of that room where they gathered to discuss your elimination. Not physical elimination. No, they're not that brave. They wanted something worse. They wanted to dismantle you piece by piece. Your reputation, your relationships, your peace of mind, your future. They wanted to take everything you've built and watch it crumble while you stood there wondering what happened. They sat around that table, these cowards who smile in your face and plot behind your back. And they asked themselves a question: how do we get inside? How do we access the parts of their life we can't see? How do we find the ammunition we need when they're so careful, so guarded, so impossible to read? And someone had an idea. Someone always has an idea when destruction is the goal. What if we send someone in? What if we create a connection? What if we manufacture a friendship, a relationship, a bond that gives us eyes and ears exactly where we need them? So they found their candidate, someone who could match your energy, someone who could speak your language, someone who seemed like they belonged in your world. They briefed this person, gave them your file, told them everything they thought they knew about you, your weaknesses, your triggers, your blind spots. They said, get close, gain trust, report back everything. And it worked. At first. That person showed up in your life at exactly the right moment, said exactly the right things, seemed to understand you in ways others didn't. You let them in. You trusted them. You opened doors you usually keep locked because something about them felt different. What you didn't know was that every conversation was being analyzed. Every vulnerable moment was being documented. Every secret you shared was supposed to become a weapon. They were building a case against you, constructing a narrative, preparing for the moment they'd have enough to strike. But something happened that wasn't in the briefing. Something occurred that their psychological profiles didn't predict. Something shifted that no amount of planning could have anticipated. That person actually got to know you. Not the version of you that your enemies described. Not the monster they painted in their strategy sessions. Not the threat they convinced themselves you were. The real you. The one who shows up when no one's watching. The one who gives without expecting. The one who carries weight that would crush most people and still asks others if they're okay. They saw you struggle and keep going. They saw you get knocked down and stand back up. They saw you have every reason to become bitter and choose kindness instead. They saw the version of you that your enemies are terrified of. Not because you're dangerous to them, but because you're proof that their entire worldview is wrong. And somewhere in that observation, somewhere in those moments of genuine connection, something broke inside them. The lies they'd been told started cracking. The mission they'd accepted started feeling wrong. The person they were supposed to destroy started feeling like the most real thing they'd ever encountered. They went back to report and found themselves editing, leaving things out, softening the truth, protecting information they were supposed to be extracting. They told themselves it was strategic, that they needed more time, more access, more trust before they could deliver the killing blow. But that was a lie they told themselves because they couldn't face the truth yet. The truth that they didn't want to destroy you anymore. The truth that somewhere along the way, the mission stopped making sense. The truth that the people who sent them started looking like the real villains in this story. You want to know when the switch happened? The exact moment they went from spy to defender? It was that night. You know which one I'm talking about. The night you broke down when no one was supposed to be watching. The night you let your guard down because you thought you were alone. The night you showed the cracks in your armor, the exhaustion behind your eyes, the weight you've been carrying that no one else can see. They witnessed that. They saw you at your most human, and in that moment they realized something that shattered their entire operation. You weren't the person they'd been told about. You weren't a target. You weren't a threat. You were just someone trying to survive in a world that keeps trying to break you, just like them. And they thought about the people who sent them, the ones who laugh at your pain, the ones who celebrate your struggles, the ones who would weaponize your vulnerable moments without a second thought. And they felt sick. Physically sick, because they almost became one of them. They almost helped them win. That's when the choice was made. Not with fanfare, not with dramatic declarations, just a quiet decision in a quiet moment. I'm not doing this. I can't do this. Whatever they're paying me, whatever they promised me, it's not worth becoming the kind of person who destroys someone like this. But they didn't just stop spying. That would have been the easy path, the neutral path, the coward's path. No, they did something that takes a kind of courage most people will never understand. They became your shield. They went back to those meetings where your destruction was planned, and they started feeding misinformation, wrong details, false vulnerabilities, strategies that would backfire. They protected the real you while giving them a fiction to chase. When your enemies planned attacks, suddenly those attacks would fail. When they tried to exploit your weaknesses, those weaknesses weren't where they expected. When they attempted to turn people against you, somehow those people had already been warned. You thought you were lucky. You thought the universe was protecting you. You thought maybe you were just too smart, too careful, too guarded to be caught. But it wasn't luck. It wasn't the universe. It wasn't even you. It was them. Your accidental guardian, your converted enemy, your spy turned soldier in a war they were supposed to be fighting against you. And here's what's really keeping your enemies up at night. They know. They've finally figured it out. They've realized their weapon went rogue. They've discovered that the person they trusted with your destruction has become the biggest obstacle to it. And they can't do anything about it. Because that person knows everything. Every plan, every strategy, every player, every weakness in their operation. If they try to remove them, everything gets exposed. If they try to discredit them, they risk their own exposure. They created a perfect double agent by accident, and now they're trapped by their own operation. The paranoia is eating them alive. If this person flipped, who else might flip? If your authenticity could convert their best operative, what does that say about their cause? If being around you is enough to make people question everything they've been told, how can they ever send anyone close to you again? You've become unconquerable. Not through force, not through strategy, not through playing their games better than they play them, but through something they don't have a defense against. Something they can't manufacture or manipulate or defeat. Being real. Just being genuinely, authentically, impossibly real. In a world full of performers, you're the one person who doesn't have a mask. In a sea of hidden agendas, you're the one person whose agenda is visible. In an existence dominated by people pretending to be something they're not, you're the one person who's exactly what they appear to be. And that's kryptonite to people built on lies. That's acid to foundations made of deception. That's nuclear radiation to systems that depend on everyone being fake. They can't fight authenticity. They can't strategize against genuine kindness. They can't defend against someone who's exactly who they claim to be, because all their weapons are designed for a different kind of war. Let me tell you what your defender sees now when they look at you. They don't see a target anymore. They see someone who changed them without trying. They see proof that their cynicism was wrong. They see evidence that good people actually exist, even in a world that punishes goodness. They see the reason they're willing to risk everything, not for money, not for advantage, but because protecting you feels like the first right thing they've done in years. You gave them something they didn't know they needed. A reason to believe again? A cause worth fighting for. A reminder of who they were before they became someone else's weapon. And now they watch your enemies with different eyes. They sit in those meetings and see the pettiness, the jealousy, the emptiness that drives the people trying to destroy you. They hear the plans and feel disgust instead of purpose. They look at the faces of your enemies and see their own former face, and they hate what they almost became. Your existence is a mirror that shows people who they really are. For some, that reflection is unbearable. They see their own darkness, and they want to destroy the mirror rather than face the truth. But for others, that reflection is a wake-up call. They see what they could become. They see the path back to themselves, and they take it. That spy took it. They looked in the mirror you unknowingly held up, and they chose differently. They chose to be the person they were before they were recruited. They chose to protect instead of destroy. They chose you over them. And now you have something your enemies never anticipated. You have someone on the inside. Someone who knows their playbook. Someone who can see their moves before they make them. Someone who turned their greatest weapon into your greatest advantage. But here's the part you need to understand. This isn't about that one person. This is about what you are. This is about the frequency you operate on. This is about the energy you carry that converts enemies into allies without you even knowing it's happening. You've been doing this your whole life. People who were supposed to hate you ended up respecting you. People who were warned about you ended up defending you. People who were sent to judge you ended up understanding you, because something about your presence cuts through programming. Something about your energy dissolves the lies people have been told. Something about your truth makes it impossible to maintain fiction. They can send 100 spies, and every single one risks being converted. They can plant 1,000 informants, and every single one might become a protector, because you're not fighting them with their weapons. You're fighting them with something they can't defend against. You're fighting them with the one thing their entire system is designed to suppress: authentic human connection. Real recognizes real. And when someone real gets close enough to you, they recognize what they've been missing. They feel the contrast between your truth and their lies. They experience the difference between your peace and their chaos. And some of them, the ones who still have a spark of who they used to be, they can't go back to the darkness after being that close to light. So what now? What do you do with this knowledge? What changes now that you know someone out there chose you over everything they were supposed to believe? Nothing. That's the answer. You do nothing different. You keep being exactly who you've been. You keep operating with the same authenticity that converted an enemy into a guardian. You keep trusting the energy that protects you in ways you can't even see. Because the moment you start performing, the moment you start strategizing, the moment you start playing their games, you lose the very thing that makes you unconquerable. Your power isn't in clever tactics. It's in being incapable of being anything other than yourself. They'll send more. They'll try again. They'll find new angles and new operatives and new schemes. And some of them will fail the normal way, but some of them will fail the extraordinary way. Some of them will get close enough to see you, really see you, and they'll make the same choice your defender made. Not this one. This one is real. This one I protect. And every time that happens, every time an enemy becomes an ally, every time a spy becomes a shield, your network grows stronger. Not a network you built, not a network you recruited, a network that assembled itself around the gravity of your authenticity. That's the real twist in this story. They thought they were infiltrating you, but you were infiltrating them. Every person they sent close enough to know you became a carrier of your frequency, a seed planted in their organization, a virus in their system that spreads the disease of truth. They're afraid now. They're finally afraid, not of what you might do to them, but of what proximity to you does to their people. They're realizing that you're not a target to be eliminated. You're a contagion to be quarantined. And they can't quarantine authenticity. So sleep well tonight, knowing that somewhere out there, someone is watching over you that you never expected. Someone is feeding your enemies lies while feeding you protection. Someone chose you when choosing you meant risking everything. And tomorrow, when you walk through your life feeling alone, feeling like no one has your back, feeling like you're fighting every battle solo, remember this: you have a defender you didn't recruit, a guardian you didn't hire, a soldier who chose your side, not because you asked, but because being around you showed them what side they should have been on all along. They planted a spy in your inner circle, but you planted something in that spy that they'll never be able to remove. You planted truth, and truth always wins. The reason the people closest to you treated you badly was never random, and it was never because you lacked something. It was because they sensed something in you that they themselves did not have, something they could feel but could not explain, and definitely could not replicate. From the moment you walked into a room, there was a certain presence about you. Not loud, not arrogant, not demanding attention, quiet, grounded, but undeniable. And people feel that, especially the people who have known you the longest. You see, strangers can ignore your light. Acquaintances can admire it from a distance, but friends and family, they are close enough to compare themselves to you every single day. They are close enough to feel the contrast. And when someone is operating from insecurity, from ego, from unhealed wounds, that contrast becomes uncomfortable. It becomes threatening. Not because you're trying to outshine them, but because your existence reminds them of what they've ignored within themselves. They noticed that you carried a certain energy, a calm resilience, a natural confidence that didn't need validation, a kindness that didn't come from weakness but from depth. And the truth is, that kind of energy cannot be taught, cannot be bought, cannot be forced. It's something you're born with, something that grows when you stay aligned with your inner truth. And that's why it bothered them. No one ever sat you down and told you this. No one ever explained why the tone changed, why the jokes became sharper, why support turned into subtle criticism. They didn't say it outright, but they showed it in small ways, in dismissive comments, in backhanded compliments, in moments where they should have defended you but stayed silent instead. And it wasn't because they hated you. It was because they didn't know how to sit with what you represented. Think about it like this. A system that benefits from your ignorance will never educate you on your worth. An environment that profits from your generosity will never encourage you to set boundaries. And people who rely on feeling superior will never remind you of your potential. Because the moment you fully realize who you are, the dynamic changes, and they know that. Deep down, they could sense that if you ever truly stepped into yourself, if you ever stopped shrinking, stopped explaining, stopped overgiving, they would no longer have the same position in your life. They wouldn't get the same access, the same emotional labor, the same forgiveness without accountability. And that scared them. You operated from sincerity, from heart. You didn't see people as competition. You didn't rank yourself above or below anyone. You met people where they were, and ironically, that openness made you an easy target, because those who operate from ego often mistake kindness for weakness. They assume that because you don't assert dominance, you must not have any. They assume that because you forgive, you must forget. They assume that because you stay calm, you must be easy to control. So they pushed. They tested. They crossed lines. Not once, but repeatedly. They wanted to see how much they could take before you reacted, how far they could go before you changed. And every time you chose grace over chaos, every time you refused to become bitter, it confused them, it frustrated them, because they expected you to break. They expected you to dim. They expected you to become smaller so they could feel bigger. But that never happened. Yes, they hurt you. And yes, there were moments where you felt it deeply. Moments where you questioned yourself. Moments where you wondered if maybe you were the problem. But every single time, you found your way back to center. You healed quietly. You regained your joy. You kept moving forward. And that's when the energy shifted. Because now, instead of seeing you as someone they could control, they began to see you as someone they could not stop. They watched you grow. They watched you detach. They watched you glow without seeking approval. And something inside them cracked. The same people who once overlooked you now watch you closely. The same people who minimized you now analyze your every move. The same people who doubted you now draw inspiration from your existence, even if they'll never admit it. Some of them wake up, and the first thing they do is check what you're doing. Not because they care, but because you remind them of everything they avoided becoming. You represent effort, alignment, self-respect. And when someone is stuck in a life they secretly resent, your progress becomes a mirror they can't look away from. They know they treated you badly. They know they underestimated you. And they know that bridge is burned. That's why the energy is different now. You don't chase closure. You don't demand apologies. You don't explain yourself. You simply don't engage. Silence became your boundary. Distance became your protection. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. You understood something that changed everything. Access to you is a privilege, not a right. Now, if they reach out, you don't respond. Not with anger, not with insults, not even with a leave me alone. You just don't respond, because the version of you they had access to no longer exists. And even if you see them in passing, you don't confront, you don't react, you don't reopen old doors. You simply choose a different path, a different direction, a different life. And that silence speaks louder than anything you could ever say. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about proving anything. This is about alignment. When you outgrow environments that were built on imbalance, separation is inevitable. And when you finally choose yourself, people who benefited from your self-neglect will always feel uncomfortable. So if you've ever wondered why the people closest to you treated you badly, now you know. It was never because you were lacking. It was because you were carrying something they weren't ready to face within themselves. And the fact that you're still standing, still growing, still becoming, while they remain stagnant, tells you everything you need to know. Anyway, if this message resonated with you, I want you to understand something. Your evolution is not an accident. There are ways to deepen this alignment, to strengthen your connection with your higher self, and to fully step into the version of you that no longer tolerates misalignment. I've put together a resource that goes deeper into this process, and you can access it for free. Just because something is free doesn't mean it isn't valuable. In fact, the most powerful knowledge is often shared, not sold. Take care of yourself, stay aligned, and keep moving forward. And here's the part most people never talk about. When you finally stop trying to explain yourself, when you stop defending your intentions, when you stopped proving your heart, that's when the shift became permanent. Because the moment you withdrew your energy, the imbalance became obvious. The dynamic no longer worked. And people who relied on your availability, your empathy, your emotional labor suddenly felt exposed. You see, for a long time, you were the stabilizer. You were the one who absorbed tension, so others didn't have to face it. You kept the peace. You softened the room. You made excuses for behavior that never deserved justification. And while you thought you were being loving, what you were really doing was delaying your own awakening. The people closest to you grew comfortable in that arrangement. They grew used to you being understanding while they stayed unchanged. They grew used to you being patient while they avoided responsibility. They grew used to you being forgiving while they avoided responsibility. They grew used to you being forgiving while they repeated the same patterns. And unconsciously, they built an identity around the idea that you would always be there to catch the fallout. So when you stopped, when you quietly stepped back, when you chose clarity over chaos, it didn't feel like growth to them. It felt like betrayal. Not because you wronged them, but because you disrupted a system that benefited them. This is why some of them reacted with confusion, others with anger, others with silence, and some tried to guilt you back into your old role. They questioned your character. They reframed the story. They painted you as cold, distant, changed. But what they really meant was, you're no longer predictable. And that's threatening to people who need control to feel safe. The truth is, when someone has access to you without respecting you, they will always resent the moment that access is revoked. Not because they lost you, but because they lost the advantage they once had. And instead of reflecting, instead of taking accountability, it's easier to say you're different now. It's easier to say you've changed. You did change. You became aware. You became selective. You became grounded. You stopped pouring into containers that had holes in the bottom. And once that happened, the roles reversed. Now they're watching from the outside. Now they're curious. Now they're wondering how you became so calm, so focused, so unbothered. They don't see the nights you spent rebuilding yourself. They don't see the internal battles you fought alone. They don't see the discipline it took to choose silence over reaction. All they see is the result, and results intimidate people who never did the work. What's important to understand is this: not everyone who mistreated you did it consciously. Some of them were simply operating from their level of awareness. Some were projecting unhealed pain. Some were repeating cycles they never questioned. And while that explains behavior, it does not excuse it. Growth does not require resentment, but it does require boundaries. And you learn that the hard way. You learn that love without self-respect becomes self-abandonment. You learn that loyalty without discernment becomes self-betrayal. And you learn that being understanding does not mean tolerating disrespect. Those lessons didn't come from books. They came from experience, from disappointment, from seeing the same patterns play out until you finally chose yourself. That's why you don't feel the need to go back and fix things. You're not angry. You're not bitter. You're simply done. Because the version of you that once over-explained, overgave, and overlooked red flags no longer exists. That version served its purpose. It got you here. But it cannot go where you're going next. And here's something else most people won't tell you. When you step into alignment, when you stop leaking energy, when you begin to honor your intuition, life responds quickly. Opportunities show up. Clarity sharpens. Your presence changes. And people feel it, even if they can't articulate it. That's why some of the same people who doubted you now seek your approval. That's why some who ignored you now watch you closely. That's why some suddenly want to reconnect without addressing the past. But silence is your answer. Not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to protect your peace. You understand now that not every chapter requires closure. Not every connection deserves continuation. And not every apology changes behavior. Sometimes the most powerful response is distance. Sometimes the loudest statement is absence. And the people who truly respect you will understand that without explanation. What you've stepped into now is a different frequency. A quieter one, a stronger one, one that doesn't need to announce itself, one that doesn't need validation, one that doesn't seek approval from people who never saw your value in the first place. You move differently now. You listen more than you speak. You observe before you engage. You choose who has access. And because of that, your energy is no longer available for manipulation. That's the real reason the people closest to you treated you badly. They sensed your potential before you did. They felt your depth before you owned it. And they reacted the only way insecure systems ever do when they feel change approaching. They tried to suppress it, but suppression never works on someone who is meant to rise. So if you're listening to this and something inside you feels seen, understand this: you're not alone, and you're not imagining things. Your awareness is sharpening because you're ready for the next level of yourself. And the discomfort you felt wasn't punishment, it was preparation. There is nothing wrong with you for outgrowing people. There is nothing cold about choosing peace. And there is nothing selfish about protecting your energy. You're not here to be consumed. You're here to become, and the moment you fully accepted that, everything began to change. Anyway, I'll leave you with this. Pay attention to who respects your boundaries without explanation. Pay attention to who supports your growth without feeling threatened. And most importantly, pay attention to how much lighter your life feels when you stop carrying people who were never meant to come with you. Stay aligned, stay grounded, and keep moving forward. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And the more time passes, the clearer it becomes why things had to unfold the way they did. Because if they had treated you well back then, if they had supported you fully, if they had honored your boundaries from the start, you might have stayed. You might have remained comfortable. You might have never questioned the imbalance. Sometimes mistreatment is the catalyst. Sometimes rejection is the redirection. And sometimes being misunderstood is exactly what forces you to understand yourself. You didn't lose people. You lost illusions. You lost the version of them you thought existed. The version that would show up when it mattered. The version that would protect you the way you protected them. And while that realization hurt, it also freed you. Because once the illusion breaks, you stop expecting depth from people who are still shallow. You stop seeking safety from those who are unsafe. And you stop asking for understanding from those who refuse to look inward. That's maturity. That's discernment. And it didn't come from comfort. It came from contrast. You can now see patterns clearly. You notice how certain people only feel confident when you're doubting yourself. You notice how some people celebrate you quietly but compete with you internally. You notice who listens to respond and who listens to understand. And because of that awareness, your tolerance for misalignment has dropped to 0. Not because you're harsh, because you're honest. And honesty changes everything. It changes who you allow into your space. It changes how much you share. It changes how quickly you detach when something feels off. You no longer wait for disrespect to become obvious. You trust the subtle signs. The tone shifts. The energy changes. The lack of reciprocity. The discomfort you used to ignore, you now acknowledge. That's growth. And with growth comes solitude, not loneliness. Solitude. There's a difference. Loneliness feels empty. Solitude feels clear. In solitude, you hear yourself again. You reconnect with your intuition. You realize how much noise you were surrounded by, how many opinions were shaping your decisions, how much of your energy was being pulled in directions that never aligned with your purpose. Now things are quieter, and in that quiet, you're building something real. You're building self-trust. You're building discernment. But you're building a life that doesn't require constant explanation. And the people who are meant to meet you at this level will recognize you without effort. There will be no confusion, no power struggles, no need to dim or perform or prove. The connection will feel steady, mutual, clean. Until then, you're comfortable standing alone, because standing alone no longer feels like abandonment. It feels like alignment. The people who treated you badly were never meant to walk this part of the journey with you. They were part of the lesson, not the destination. And once you stopped trying to drag them forward, once you stopped waiting for them to catch up, your path cleared. That's when momentum returned. That's when your focus sharpened. That's when your energy stabilized. You stopped leaking power into places that didn't nourish you. And as a result, your life began responding differently. Doors opened without force, clarity replaced confusion, and peace became your default state instead of something you had to fight for. This is what happens when you choose yourself consistently. Not once, not occasionally, but every day. And here's the final thing to understand. People don't mistreat those they respect. They mistreat those they believe will tolerate it. The moment you stop tolerating it, the moment you withdrew access, the moment you chose silence over explanation, everything changed. Not because you became cold, but because you became clear. So if you're listening to this and you've been questioning why certain people fell away, why connections dissolved, why familiar faces no longer feel familiar, trust that process. You didn't lose your way. You found it. And the peace you feel now, even if it's unfamiliar, even if it's quiet, even if it feels empty at times, that peace is proof you're no longer betraying yourself to keep others comfortable. Hold on to that. Protect that. Build from that. Because the life you're stepping into requires a different version of you. A grounded one, an aware one, a self-respecting one, and you're already becoming that person. One boundary at a time, one choice at a time, one quiet moment of self-honor at a time. Stay steady, stay aligned, and never forget, you were never mistreated because you were weak. You were mistreated because you were powerful and they sensed it long before you did.